Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, May 7th. Hope everybody's having a great day so far. It has been a wild day in sports. Of course, the big story being George Pickens traded from the Pittsburgh Steelers to the Dallas Cowboys. We'll break that story down. We'll talk about the NBA action from last night. For the first time in NBA history, all road playoff teams have taken game one, home court disadvantage, you might call it, in round two of the NBA playoffs. We'll talk about the overtime game and the comeback effort in the NHL, as well as just some updates from around the NFL as we get to that at the end. But before we get into George Pickens, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, May 7th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into everything that you need to know about one George Pickens moving to the Cowboys in a blockbuster trade. Of course, we're going to start off from the Cowboys side before we get into George Pickens and the Steelers situation. George Pickens, of course, a very interesting wide receiver. He is someone that is undoubtedly incredibly talented at the wide receiver position. One of, if not the best hands in all of the NFL. The best contested catch receiver for my money in the entire NFL. But also, he is a guy that it helps him on the field, I'm sure, but it also hurts him, whereas he has a big personality, right? He's someone that clearly got the Steelers rubbed the wrong way. His relationship with the Steelers front office, Coach Mike Tomlin, wasn't really the best, and I know the Steelers have the ability to deal with personalities. They dealt with Antonio Brown. They kind of controlled him as best as anybody really could. They've dealt with Le'Veon Bell, who held out. They've dealt with Big Ben, who had a big personality of his own, going on and blaming all his teammates and stuff. There's a lot of things that the Steelers have dealt with, but for whatever reason, George Pickens, for his supreme talent, just was too much for the Steelers to handle, and they were rubbed the wrong way by it. So once they went out and they traded for DK Metcalf, the Steelers did, the writing, at least for me, and for what I've seen around the internet as well, a lot of people saying the writing was on the wall there. George Pickens and DK Metcalf are the same player. Obviously, they have a couple different strengths and weaknesses. George Pickens is probably the best contested ball receiver in the NFL. DK Metcalf is more of a straight line speed guy, but still a big physical deep threat receiver. And that's what you had at both wide receiver positions, which could have been fun. But also, it seemed like the relationship had soured with George Pickens. The Cowboys, on the other hand, one of their biggest weaknesses, wide receiver. They needed to get a wide receiver bad to pair next to CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb has had zero help last season. In 2023, his numbers from 2023, where he had 1,700 yards, was an all-pro receiver. They dropped drastically when they didn't have a second threat that came from having a guy like Brandon Cooks there, even though Brandon Cooks not necessarily the biggest threat overall. He had 600 less yards, CeeDee Lamb did, that last year than he did 2 years ago, 45 less catches, and half as many touchdowns in the same period of time. That is something that the Cowboys desperately needed. They didn't have another second option on the offense. It was just throw the ball up to CeeDee Lamb, see what he can do. Now that you have a guy in George Pickens that can be a true deep threat, a guy that can really take defenders away from CeeDee Lamb, that Cowboys offense is going to be dangerous. Pickens, of course, had a bit of a down season last year, at least when comparing it to what he had done in previous years. He goes for 900 yards on 59 catches, only 3 touchdowns. He had over 1,000 yards in the season prior, catching 63 balls, going for 1,140 yards, as well as 5 touchdowns. In his rookie season, we saw a very similar approach to what happened in 2024, 52 catches, 801 yards, and 4 touchdowns, but the Steelers' offense as a whole was just kind of down last year with the quarterbacks being switched. There are a lot of things that changed along the lines of George Pickens, but he now joins a Cowboys squad. The Cowboys, in order to get him, gave up a 2026 third-round pick and a 2027 fifth-round pick. The Cowboys got, of course, George Pickens, as well as a sixth-round pick in 2027. There's a lot of ways to look at this. Again, for the Steelers, their wide receiver room is a mess right now. It would have been nice for them to hold on to George Pickens, but at the end of the day, it just felt like that relationship had run its course and they needed to move off of him. Right now, wide receiver 2 for the Steelers, we're looking at Robert Woods to be wide receiver 2, and he doesn't have that ability anymore. Calvin Austin, who I think is a nice piece, not really a wide receiver 2, but there's lots of opportunities for them to go sign guys. You have guys out in the open market, veterans like Amari Cooper, veterans like Keenan Allen, guys like Gabe Davis, who just got cut today that we'll talk a little bit about later on in the show. There's a lot of options out there for the Steelers. Of course, it doesn't matter who you have if you don't have a quarterback. Mason Rudolph is not a guy that you go into the season seriously thinking that you're happy with, regardless of all the reports coming out of Pittsburgh, where they're saying, yes, we'd be but we'd be happy with Mason Rudolph as our starter. You're lying. We don't like liars here at the GSMC Down by Contact Sports podcast. Not a big fan of that. George Pickens going to the Cowboys is going to be huge, though. The big question, though, with the Steelers on the other side is what does this mean as far as a potential Aaron Rodgers signing, which this was always going to get roped in. Aaron Rodgers is, in my opinion, the Steelers quarterback. There is a lot of things we still don't know. He obviously still hasn't signed, but I think there's almost a 5% or less chance that he does not sign with the Steelers and instead retires. There's not really another real option out there for him. Aaron Rodgers has done throw-arounds with DK Metcalf. Nothing has come out about him doing throw-arounds with George Pickens, which makes me think the Steelers were communicating this with him. Of course, it's not like Aaron Rodgers is holding them hostage, but this is something that I'm sure the Steelers would have told him if they were seriously trying to court Aaron Rodgers into going over there. Overall, this is a very interesting trade. I don't think this trade gets made if George Pickens has the demeanor of your average NFL wide receiver. If George Pickens has your kind of attitude on the field as your average NFL wide receiver, but that's what makes George Pickens special. This isn't something to tear him down over. This isn't something that we need to say this isn't going to work in Dallas. He's someone that he cares about the game. He gets invested in it, and sometimes it just spills over a little bit too much. Because of that, he got run out of Pittsburgh, but his fit with Dak and CeeDee Lamb on the other side is going to be amazing to watch. That Cowboys offense is going to be very dangerous now. I've seen some people say the opposite, but George Pickens, like I said, one of the best contested catch receivers in the entire NFL. You get Dak Prescott, you give Dak Prescott that kind of weapon, he's going to throw it up to him. It's going to free up space for CeeDee Lamb. That is going to be a dangerous offense down in Dallas this season. I love this trade for the Cowboys. For the Steelers, it makes sense because, again, that relationship had soured. But it's not something that you love roster-wise unless they make another move that brings in a more wide receiver talent like a Keenan Allen or like an Amari Cooper, someone like that can step in and play that wide receiver 2 role next to DK Metcalf. I'd love to see what happens over there, but I also would love to hear your thoughts. What did you think about this trade? Huge news post-draft. This changes a lot of things in the NFL, power rankings in the NFC East, how the Steelers look at this season coming up, whether or not they're going to tank or not. Again, a big conversation over there in Pittsburgh, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think of this trade? We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to the NBA playoffs. The Pacers have pulled off the second miracle comeback of these playoffs. We'll talk about what happened there against the Cavs, as they have now taken a 2-0 series lead and continue the trend of home court equals a loss. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, May 7th, if you were just tuning in. We just finished going over the major news from around sports today. George Pickens, now a member of the Dallas Cowboys, a blockbuster trade post-draft here for Jerry Jones and the Pittsburgh Steelers. In this segment, we turn our attention over to the NBA. Some crazy action last night, a massive upset where the Pacers now have a 2-0 lead on an incredible comeback, a miracle comeback in the final minute. We'll talk about that, how it happened, what it means for the rest of the series. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, May 7th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit on the Pacers and Cavs series. The Pacers have pulled off their second miracle comeback. What do I mean by miracle comeback? They obviously had the one against the Bucks in round one, ending up eliminated them. In this situation where you are down by 7 points with less than 1 minute to go in a basketball game for fourth quarter or overtime, the history of the NBA playoffs, the record for teams in that situation, 3-161. Now, I mentioned, of course, the one in round one. The Pacers have 2 of those wins, which means entering these playoffs, the record for teams in that situation were 1 win, 161 losses, down by 7 in the last minute of the fourth quarter or overtime. The Pacers have now done it not once but twice in 2 series here as they take a commanding 2-0 lead over the Cleveland Cavaliers. Let's talk about this game a little bit, though. Outside of the crazy comeback, Tyrese Halliburton continues to be one of the most clutch players in the NBA. He, of course, was voted as the most overrated player in the NBA, which I don't know how accurate that is. He has stepped up huge in these playoffs, but of course, you look at the numbers from around the season, it's not just these playoffs that matter. In clutch time, which means to hit a game-tying or game-winning shot with less than 10 seconds to go in the game. Tyrese Halliburton this season is 10 out of 11. That is insane efficiency on these clutch shots. Tyrese has been able to step up in all of those occasions. It is incredibly impressive. We're looking at a guy shooting 35% in those situations, and we are calling that a massive success rate, right? That's just not a normal thing to be really good at. It's incredibly impressive to see. But the Pacers just play fast. This is the thing that we talked about heading into the series. Both of these teams are very similar. The issue is injuries are going to pop up on one side, and it's not on the Pacers side of the ball. The Cleveland Cavaliers dealt with a Darius Garland injury basically all of the first round. They were able to escape just fine. He wasn't in game 1. He also missed game 2. And it wasn't just him. In game 2, despite Donovan Mitchell going for 48 points on 15 of 30 shooting from the field, which is incredible. Donovan Mitchell doing his superhero act, trying to keep this Cavs team in the playoffs. They didn't have Evan Mobley, the defensive player of the year, on the court either, or their sixth man, a guy that they got their big deadline acquisition in DeAndre Hunter. He had stepped up huge in game one and earlier on in that series, trying to fill those Darius Garland minutes. You had Ty Jerome and you had Donovan Mitchell versus the world. And that's just not going to work very well against this Pacers squad. Regardless of all that, it was working very well. They were up by a massive margin heading into the fourth quarter. If you look at the scoring chart, they were winning the entire game. The win probability chart, they were winning the entire game until the very end, when a 7-point lead dissipates as if it were absolutely nothing into thin air as Tyrese Halliburton completes a miracle comeback for them, missing his second free throw, not even on purpose, really, the way it looked, getting his own rebound, dribbling it back out, and hitting a clutch three-pointer to tear the hearts out of the Cleveland fans. That is a brutal way to go. You've now lost both games at home. You're down 2-0 in a series where you don't have two of your top four guys, don't have a very important player coming off the bench in DeAndre Hunter. It's going to be real tough to come back against a deep, deep Pacers squad. Of course, we've talked about Halliburton a lot, but they have Siakam, they have Turner, they have Mathurin, they have all of these guys coming off the bench. TJ McConnell steps up huge. Obi Toppin is a kind of an underrated guy on that team. I really love the minutes that he puts in. You have a lot of guys coming up and stepping up huge for the Pacers in this one. And they just play fast, right? You don't have a second off. You don't have one possession off against this team. If you're jogging back on defense, they're going to run that break. If you are just not in the game for a second, they're going to hit a shot in your face. That's how the Pacers play. They're a very dangerous team, and that's why they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals last season. They're playing the same way that they did, and you can talk about their path being easy, right? You can talk about last year, of course, they ran into a very similar kind of path where players were injured along the way. Of course, they still go 7 against the Knicks, and they survived that one, but the Knicks were dealing with some injuries in that series, right? In this series, of course, we talked about the Cavs' injuries in this one. That is something that, is not exactly, that's not something that is easy to ignore. It's going to be a story in this series, but it doesn't discount any less what the Pacers have done, right? The Pacers did not have to go up against Giannis last year in the first round. They didn't have to go up against Dame this year in the first round. Injuries the whole way through. Again, it's going to be a storyline, and people are going to try and discredit this Pacers team, but they're here for a reason. They're playing good basketball. They had the 4th best record in the NBA since January 1st. Since the calendar year, they had the 4th best record in the NBA, and right now, they are in a position where they could potentially sweep the number 1 seed in the East, a team that looked like it was just head and shoulders, potentially even the best team in the NBA, head and shoulders above everybody in the East at a minimum. Injuries will do that, and you can blame coaching. Donovan Mitchell is doing his best. What this series kind of reminds me of right now is what Donovan Mitchell had to go through when he was in Utah, right? You had a Utah Jazz squad that would pretty consistently make it to the second round, but they just didn't have the guys. You had Rudy Gobert as a second option. That's not what you want as a second option. They didn't have the offensive firepower to get past whoever they were facing in the second round, and that seemingly is rearing its ugly head again. The Cavaliers are a team that looked like they made a breakthrough, and kudos, of course, to new head coach of the year over there in Cleveland, but injuries are a killer. One of the most important things when you're trying to go on a title run is having health, right? And that's not something you can coach. That's not something you can plan for. That's not something, you can try and build a team around, but you want to have the right guys out on the floor. You're not saying, okay, we're going to be able to build a team despite losing our entire starting 5. There's a lot of ways to get around this. But this Pacers team is incredibly impressive. Again, for a second time this postseason, they have come back from a near impossible seeming deficit, 7 points with less than a minute to go. This was an incredible comeback by then. Don't let the story be the fact that injuries are a part of it. It's part of the story, but it's not the main story. The main story here is this is a Pacers team that has come to play. This is a Pacers team that is dangerous, and this is a Pacers team that belongs in the conversation for one of the top teams in the East. They've taken a 2-0 series lead over the number 1 seed in the East, a team that won 65-plus games this season. This is an incredibly talented squad, and they have a real shot of representing the East. I know they got swept last year by the Celtics, but if you were watching those games were really close. I do expect the Celtics to win, but even if they don't, they took care of business against the Knicks. This is a better Pacers team than it was last year. They're deeper, they have more options, and Tyrese Halliburton has more experience in the playoffs. This is exactly what you don't want to see. A red-hot Pistons team, a red-hot Pacers team right now. They are dangerous. They're going to cause trouble once you get there. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of this game? What did you think of the Pacers' miracle comeback? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to the other game. Steph Curry, the big story in that one. Steph Curry goes down with an injury early on in the second quarter. The Wolves don't find a way to win that one, though. A brutal way to go. Steph Curry out for at least a week. We'll talk about what that means for the series, what it means for the game, and what it means for the Warriors going forward. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, May 7th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over the Pacers and their second miracle comeback of this playoffs, this time against the Cleveland Cavaliers to establish a 2-0 dominant series lead, taking both games on the road. See if they can continue it at home coming up in a couple days. In this segment, we turn our attention over to the other game in basketball that took place last night. Steph Curry and the Warriors tipped off Game 1 against Anthony Edwards and the Minnesota Timberwolves. We saw the Warriors take Game 1 99-88, but that wasn't the big story. Steph Curry going down with a grade 1 hamstring strain. We'll talk about what that means for the rest of the series, what it means for Curry in specific, and if the Warriors still have a chance without it. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, May 7th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into everything we need to go over with Steph Curry and the Warriors. Let's talk about the game real quick because this one was a wild one, of course. Steph Curry starts off red hot. He plays 13 minutes in this game, 13 points. On his last bucket, he comes down a little awkward off of a jump shot. Non-contact injury. Turns out he misses the rest of the game, coming out early in that second quarter after 13 minutes of action with a grade 1 hamstring strain. This means he's going to be held out for at least 1 week of basketball, putting his timetable at return at Game 5 at the earliest. Game 4 is 6 days away if they really, really pushed it, which I doubt they will with a 37-year-old Steph Curry. As much as they want him back, they're going to need other guys to step up in his place. The Warriors do find a way to win this one, and it's not necessarily because they played the best. They played solid basketball. Draymond Green had a pretty good game. Buddy Hield shot the lights out in the second half. Again, not something I think he can keep up. Jimmy Butler really took over. Playoff Jimmy is there, of course. But the big story for this game, other than the defense of the Golden State Warriors, is the fact that Timberwolves could not hit a shot. They shot 10%. That's right, 10% from the three-point line. Anthony Edwards started out the game 0 for 10 from the field, had 1 point at the end of the first half. This was a game that was never really that close. The Warriors held them under 90 points, and over the last 2 games that the Timberwolves have played, including Game 5, the closeout game against the Los Angeles Lakers, they have combined for the worst 2-game shooting stretch in the history of the NBA playoffs. This is something that will turn around. We talked a little bit about it when we had the beginning of the Lakers series, and the Wolves popped out with 50% from 3. That's not going to last forever. This shooting slump, shooting 10 and 15% from three-point land, that's not going to last forever either, right? This is something that the water will find its level. But for now, it's very concerning because this is a Timberwolves team that kind of lives and dies by the 3. Anthony Edwards, their leading scorer, of course, hit the most 3-pointers in the NBA this season, edging out Malik Beasley by just 1 at the end of the year. He is the 3-point king this season. This is not going to be easy for the Warriors going forward. We talked about the timetable for Steph Curry. They don't really have a guy that can step up. They're looking at guys like Podziemski. They're looking at guys like Gary Payton. But you look at that starting lineup, the guy that they're really going to need to step up and the guy that they're going to need to take center stage is the guy that's been calling himself Robin this whole time. They need him to become Red Hood over there, become his own guy, become Nightwing, depending on which Robin he is. You have Jimmy Butler, playoff Jimmy, the guy that's going to step up and be the one that keeps them in this series, because if they go down 3-1, there's not a chance they come back. As good as Steph Curry is, as good as Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler and that whole Warriors roster is, as resilient and as physical and as fast and as hard as they play, it's not going to be enough if you fall down 3-1. They need to find a way to steal at least one game without Steph Curry. And in the real possibility that Steph Curry does not play for the rest of the series, they need to be able to rely on Jimmy Butler. They need to be able to rely on the shooting of Buddy Hield that has been red hot for the last 2 games. Again, not something that I really think can keep up. We've seen Buddy Hield go through stretches like this, but then he always seems to come crashing down to earth, go like he was in the first half, 0 for 8 from 3 in that one. It didn't matter because the Timberwolves also couldn't shoot, but it's not going to be like that forever. Draymond Green continues to be a facilitator. It was really impressive in this one, what he was able to do. That defense for the Warriors is ranked number 1 since Jimmy Butler has been there. So it's not like they're out there with no shot at all. But that injury to Steph Curry is going to be a backbreaker for them. And honestly, I'm not sure if they're going to survive. If they can keep this series at 2-2 by the time he comes to return, it's going to be really interesting. This was already a series that I thought was a toss-up when everyone was fully healthy or ready to play each and every game. This was a series, Anthony Edwards, who has a lot of animosity towards Steve Kerr, especially with the things that happened in the draft clause, a lot of animosity towards Draymond Green for his trash talk. Same thing with Rudy Gobert. Him and Draymond Green don't like each other. This is a series that has a lot of storylines for Jimmy Butler returning to Minnesota for the first time since he staged his coup and forced his way out of there. There is a lot of connections here between these two teams, and these are two teams that are going to play a very tough series. Both of these teams are big. Both of these teams can battle down low. Rudy Gobert needs to step up too, right? If the shooting isn't working, you need to be able to dish it down low, get your guys going. Anthony Edwards, again, he's not going to shoot like that every single night. He's going to be better, and the Warriors just need to be able to find an offensive engine like Jimmy Butler who can step up and hit the shots when he needs to. That's exactly what they're waiting on, and I think they'll be able to do it. I think they'll be able to take one game with the Timber without Steph Curry, and if they can do that, they're in good shape, especially if Steph Curry returns in Game 5. If he doesn't, this is a Timberwolves series in 6 games. I could see him taking 1, maybe 2. Taking this one game is huge. It gives them a step up without Curry that they really need, a step up above the Timberwolves that, at least the Timberwolves need an extra game to take the lead against them. It's not going to be easy for either of these teams. That defense for the Warriors is no joke, but it's also not going to be a quick return for Steph Curry. That soft tissue injury with the way that Steph Curry plays, his nonstop running, his just energy all around the court, you try doing that on a little bit of a tweaked hamstring, it's not the same. It's not going to be easy. And at 37 years old, I can't imagine he's going to be able to be rushed back into this one faster than, again, minimum Game 5. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think the Warriors still have a chance in this series without Steph Curry? Do you think the Wolves are going to continue to struggle shooting from 3? How long do you think that's going to take for them to find their stroke there? I'd love to hear what you have to say. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to the ice. 2 major games in the NHL last night. We'll talk about each of those, an overtime game between the Capitals and the Hurricanes, and a comeback victory for the Edmonton Oilers, their 5th straight comeback victory in the Stanley Cup playoffs. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, May 7th, if you are just tuning in. We just finished going over both basketball games from last night, the fallout from Steph Curry's injury, and much more. In this segment, we turn our attention to the ice. Action over there for round 2 has also kicked off. We saw game 1 between the Oilers and the Golden Knights, as well as game 1 between the Capitals and the Hurricanes. We'll get to that in a second, but before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those 2 things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, May 7th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into everything we need to know about the on-ice action in Game 1 of Round 2. We'll start off in the nation's capital, the Washington Capitals taking on the Carolina Hurricanes, a series that should be really tight throughout, and it showed in Game 1. Final score of 2-1 in overtime in favor of the Hurricanes, a game that started off with Hurricane domination all the way at the beginning, the middle, and the end. Now, it says here that the Canes, on our graphic here, had to do it in comeback fashion. Despite their dominance, Logan Thompson, goalie for the Washington Capitals, played out of his mind. The defense for the Washington Capitals, not necessarily breaking, but definitely bending. They blocked a whole lot of shots, 31 blocked shots to be specific. That is not a great number. It is in the fact that you're not letting those pucks get to the net, but it's not great because it means they dominated offensive zone possession the entire time. Alexi Protas opened up the scoring early in the second period in this one with a wrister from the right side, right past goaltender Freddie Anderson, who was pretty much alone all night. The Capitals did not have a lot of pressure, a lot of opportunities in the offensive zone. Instead, they just got one on the break. Protas cashes it in, but that was it from the Caps. This was total and utter domination by the Carolina Hurricanes throughout this entire game. And if that's the way this series goes, we're looking at a very quick series and the number one seed in the East going home in the Washington Capitals. That's not going to be the way that I think they respond every single night. This was a very physical game, as we expected it to be with these two teams. Of course, anything involving Tom Wilson is going to have a lot of emotion in it when you're looking at the Washington, when you're talking about on the ice over there. But both of these goaltenders, in Freddie Anderson and Logan Thompson, have played really good, right? These are two guys that throughout these entire playoffs have been near perfect. This game went to overtime where we saw Jacob Slavin, a defensive defenseman, a guy that not going to see score the goal too many times, be able to cash one in from the point. This was just like put the Caps out of their misery kind of game. And that's what the coach said. This was not a good game by any stretch of the imagination. They need to play better, the Capitals do, if they have any hope at all of making it to the Eastern Conference Finals and facing off against the Florida Panthers or the Toronto Maple Leafs, currently tied at 2 right now in the second period. This is going to be a crazy series. And I can't imagine that the Canes continue to dominate the way that they have, the way that they did in Game 1. You have too much offensive firepower on the Washington Capitals. The defense, while it isn't necessarily their strength, it isn't a major weakness either. The Caps have speed on their side, and they should be able to get better possession in the offensive zone. As long as Logan Thompson keeps playing like that, you get more pucks on net in Freddie Anderson. That's going to make this series a lot more entertaining. But if the Caps can't turn it on and the Canes keep playing like this, the Canes overall, with their current head coach, 8-1 in series where they win Game 1. It's not a great sign for the Washington Capitals, and that Game 1 was a huge swing in momentum towards what's going on in the Eastern Conference playoffs. Outside of that, the second game that took place last night, place last night on the ice, the Oilers and the Golden Knights, Game 1. And this started off about as bad as it possibly could have for the Oilers. In the first minute of the game, a double minor for high sticking and drawing blood, a 4-minute penalty, leads to the first goal for the Golden Knights as they cash in a 1-0 lead. And that seemed to be all the Oilers need to turn it around. The Oilers, for some reason, love falling behind. They have now won 5 straight games. That's right, 5 straight games when losing initially. That's not supposed to happen in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but this is exactly what they do. When you have an offense as high-powered as the Oilers do, when you have McDavid and Draisaitl and Hyman got in on the action there in this one, when you have these guys that can step up, Connor Brown as well got in on the action with a crazy deke move to get past the defenseman of the Vegas Golden Knights. It's just never going to be easy. No lead is safe, and they have proven that with, again, 5 straight comeback victories in the Stanley Cup playoffs. We're used to something crazy happening every single night in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but still, that is not a normal thing. That's not something they should get into a habit of doing, because when you go up against a team that has a better goaltender, Darcy Kemper, as good as he was this season, is not someone that I consider to be an elite goaltender. As good as Adin Hill has been all season, he has not been very good these playoffs, especially in round 1 against the Wild with a -5 expected goals against average, which means he was letting in way too many goals than they were expected to, right? Next round, if the Oilers advance, if they're able to get past this Vegas Golden Knights team, they're going to have to go up against a really good goalie, either in Connor Hellebuck or Jake Ottinger. And if they find a way past that, they're going to have to go up against a really good goalie again. Either that be the Capitals' Logan Thompson, Freddie Anderson for the Canes, who are playing really well, or Sergei Bobrovsky, who has been the playoff MVP for the Panthers the last couple of seasons, or Anthony Stolarz, who's playing really, really well for the Toronto Maple Leafs this season. There's not necessarily going to be an easy goaltender waiting for them, especially if they face especially in whoever they face when it comes to the Western Conference Finals. It's not going to be easy. I'm very curious to see how they respond to this, but of course, they forced a Game 7 against the Panthers last year, and when they seemed basically dead in the Stanley Cup Finals, they were so close to getting it done, bringing a cup back to Canada. We'll see if they can do it again. Overall, this is just exactly what you can expect out of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Insanity, craziness, overtime. It's must watch, really. The NBA and the NHL at the same time is kind of criminal because you can't watch both, but constant action, we really do love it. But we're going to take a quick break. I'd love to hear your thoughts on playoff hockey so far. But when we come back, we turn our attention back to the NFL. Some big news out of the NFL. The Jaguars have cut a wide receiver. We'll talk about what's going on in free agency and much more coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, May 7th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over all of the playoff action, NBA, NHL, anything else that you would need to know about here. We just finished going over that. In this segment, we turn our attention back to the NFL. Of course, the major news, George Pickens being traded, we covered earlier on in the show, but there was some other minor news going on around the NFL that we've just kind of ignored so far. We'll talk about that in a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, May 7th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our fifth and final segment here on the show. Just NFL updates for you. Lots of stuff going on around the league. We're going to start it off with what's going on in Jacksonville, as today the Jags have moved off of wide receiver Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis, of course, a playoff hero in Buffalo, a guy who went off against the Chiefs in a game that they were just not able to win, one of the craziest games in NFL playoff history. 4 touchdowns in that one. He gets his payday off of just a couple big games, 3 years, $36 million due to Gabe Davis. His first year in Jacksonville was an unmitigated disaster. 20 catches, 239 yards, and 2 touchdowns, as well as being shut down early due to injury. Just 1 year into that 3-year deal that we mentioned earlier, but he's still a guy that I think could be valuable on a team. Not someone that I think you need as a wide receiver 1, mind you, but if you get him as your deep threat, as your wide receiver 2 or more likely 3, I would say. Gabe Davis is a guy that, if you get him on the right day, can be a really good wide receiver in the NFL. He always has one game. He had 2 touchdowns in one game last year. That's where he had most of his production. This year, he'll find a new team. But the issue is, he's going into what's really a deep wide receiver pool in free agency. We talked a little bit about it. Keenan Allen is still out there coming off of a really solid season with the Bears. You have Amari Cooper, who's coming off of not a great season with the Bills and the Browns, but still someone that I think has some gas left in the tank and someone that I think could be really effective as a true wide receiver 2 for some teams. He's going to fall to 3rd or maybe even 4th in the pecking order when it comes to wide receivers and their free agencies. He's probably not going to get a massive deal. In fact, if he got a massive deal, I would be absolutely shocked. The number he got from the Jags was already too much for my blood, and we see why. He is now off of a roster over there. There's plenty of wide receiver needy teams. I could see the Chargers trying to go out and get a guy like him. The Steelers, I could see trying to go out and get a guy like Gabe Davis. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of options for them. Gabe Davis is just going to have to find someone to take him in, and it's not going to be at a very high price. Outside of Gabe Davis, big news out of Philadelphia, Dallas Goedert planning on coming back in 2025. He played 10 games last season. He was right about on pace for his usual average. He was on pace for about 3 touchdowns and about 800 yards. He is at 11.8 yards per reception, which is right around what he usually is at. Dallas Goedert is not necessarily your Travis Kelce's, your Brock Bowers, your George Kittles in that world of tight ends, but he's better. He's in that mid-range. He's a guy that you feel very, very happy with as a reliable option, a reliable safe threat. He's someone that you group in with your Jake Ferguson kind of things, your current day Zach Ertz. These are the guys that you put Dallas Goedert in. And he's not necessarily going to get the biggest contract when it comes to tight end contracts, but he is someone that I truly do believe is worth keeping around. You keep that Philadelphia Eagles offense that was so potent last year with Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts. You have A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith on the outside. Dallas Goedert is kind of that forgotten cog in the wheel, but a lot of times he's the one that gets it going. He's a really good blocking tight end. He's a guy that many times throughout the season last year was making insane one-handed catches, keeping them alive, especially in games late in the season where he was their leading receiver when Jalen Hurts was down. That's something that kind of was undervalued a little bit by him, but he is coming back to Philadelphia to play in 2025. They just need to work on the numbers exactly. But the last big piece of news that we haven't covered so far is kind of the most outrageous one. Leaning back a little bit more towards the NFL draft, Abdul Carter, first pick by the New York Giants, the number 3 overall selection in this year's draft, simply cannot find a number. He, of course, started off by asking for number 56, formerly worn and retired from the Giants by maybe the best defensive player in the history of the NFL, Lawrence Taylor. That one was never going to happen. I don't think that one ever should come out of retirement unless something crazy happens. Lawrence Taylor, of course, said no, and I support that decision. I think that's the right decision. Some players' jerseys just deserve to stay retired forever. Then he went out and he talked to Phil Simms. Phil Simms was asked about on the podcast for number 11, also retired by the Giants. If Abdul Carter asked for it, would he say yes? Phil Simms said absolutely he should. He would. He would allow him to take that number out of retirement. The Giants, of course, had a number unretired last year for Malik Neighbors. Number 1 was unretired last year for him. Phil Simms said yes, but the issue is his family said no, which kind of brings up a whole nother point. I understand having retired numbers, right? But if the player that has that number retired says, you can take my number, especially if he's alive and cognitive and all these things, if the estate says no, the guy should overrule it. Phil Simms should get the last say on this, not the family. I understand there's a whole argument right now about whether or not numbers should be retired, about how to handle this, numbers coming out of retirement. I understand it's a big enough conversation. We've seen this issue before. Obviously, numbers have been unretired in the past. Warren Moon unretired his number for Cam Ward this year, that number 1 for the Titans. It's not something that's unheard of. Again, Malik Neighbors did it last year with the Giants, unretiring number 1. But there does need to be something. Look, if Phil Simms is a Giants, great. But he's not someone that necessarily is going to be remembered forever as a Giants. It's not going to be remembered forever, right? You have guys whose numbers will be retired, like Lawrence Taylor's, that are legends of the game, whose number should never be worn by another Giant ever, right? Phil Simms, he deserved to get his number retired for what he did with the Giants, but there has to be, I think, a little bit of a higher bar. The Giants don't have too many numbers retired, but Penn State wears that number 11. That's their you're the best player on the team number, right? That's like wearing number 10 in soccer. That's like wearing number 88 for the Cowboys as a wide receiver, right? These are numbers that aren't going to get retired, but are legendary numbers, which is something that I've heard of as a way to, fix this issue. And that's not necessarily the worst decision I've heard, but numbers deserve to be retired. Players who do amazing things deserve to be recognized by that franchise, especially if they stayed their whole career there, right? That's something that's kind of undervalued nowadays. I think we're going to start to see less and less retired numbers because these guys move around so much. And that's not necessarily 100% going to happen. But it has been tough for Abdul Carter to find a number. It's kind of a ridiculous saga. It should get figured out soon. He'll find a number. I think number 4 is available. That's most likely what he's going to go with. Maybe he'll pay a vet to take one of their numbers. But he's still got time to pick his number. Obviously, numbers, not the biggest deal, but, it's not the end of the world. But it's also something that you should be able to get the number you want to play in, especially if it's one like Phil Simms, who said he'd be willing to give it up. The player said he did, even if the family didn't. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about retired numbers in the NFL? That's been a whole conversation. What do you think about Gabe Davis? What do you think about Dallas Goedert? I'd love to hear what you have to say. And thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We'll be back tomorrow talking everything from around the world of sports. The Celtics and the Knicks game 2. We'll talk about all of the action from the NBA as well as anything else that comes up tomorrow. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to